In 1984, Barry Philip Nickel, a Canadian poet more commonly known under his artist name B.P. Nickel, published a series of very unique poems for his time. First screening, computer poems, were a dozen of short, kinetic poems. They were not distributed on paper as tradition would have had it, but rather on floppy disks. Indeed, for 2 years, Nichols had started to learn Apple Basic, a programming language on the Apple II. He decided not to write poems, but to program them. As such, in first screening computer poems, words were liberated from the stillness of paper and given the liberty to move. A year earlier, on January 3rd, 1983, the computer was named the man, or in this case the machine of the year, by Time magazine. Sales for PCs had been doubling year after year. People's interests were spiking for the magical box filled with transistors.
Amiga's got the guts to do things that you can't do on other hardware.
And it does all the work for you. Wow. State-of-the-art technology.
But it was still just a box. However, this was soon to change. Much like Nickel, someone else had seen potential in the computer. The device was becoming more than just a tool for scientists, engineers, and academics, but a bicycle for the mind. And, as BP had demonstrated, a paintbrush for artists as well. This person happened to be one of the brains behind the digital pen with which the Canadian poet wrote, or programmed, first screening. Of course, this was none other than the now mythical Steve Jobs. As a child, Steve saw the first ever office computer that Hewlett-Packard were developing, the 9100A. He described it as beauty incarnate. The young boy matured at the same time as this new digital technology, his identity later becoming intrinsically intertwined with it. One could argue that, despite all of his flaws, the man had a fundamental voice in establishing the computer as an art object.
Troy, the big difference when he grows up, in fact, if we wanted to wait for the year 2001, is that he will have in his own house, not a computer as big as this, but at least a console through which he can talk to his friendly local computer and get all the information he needs for his everyday life, like his bank statements, his theater reservations, all the information you need in the course of living in a complex modern society. This will be in a compact form in his own house. He'll have a television screen like these here and a keyboard, and he'll talk to the computer and get information from it, and he'll take it as much for granted as we take the telephone.
The mid-20th century gave rise to the information age, where knowledge was not only power, but also money. In 1964, many students and academics at the University of California in Berkeley felt that their time in academia was spent on a training ground for their future corporate lives.
Now, that traditional view of the university, that's the one that had been attacked by the revolutionaries, by those who, would make it into a kind of adjunct to industry, to the government and so forth. Really?
They were cogs in an assembly line for knowledge, and no machine more commonly represented this stratified, depersonalized social order than the computer. The machine was a pretty scary thing. It occupied entire rooms. It was heartless and was born in the heat of the Cold War. It was also a symbol for authority and a reminder of the power of the military-industrial complex.
This can't be the data point. This technology is ancient.
Being used to calculate missile trajectories, the computer was far away from being a household item. Let's look back at the time cover, and let me read you a couple of passages from the cover story. Feel free to close your eyes and get cozy. Ever see one of these before, mister? Yes, you. I'm talking to you, ma'am. Ever work one of these Commodores or Timex Sinclairs or Osborne 1s or TRS 83s? How do you like them apples? Just a joke, son. Good, clean fun. But you look so skeptical, like you're from Missouri, and I want to sell you one of these beauties. 'Cause you need it. 'Cause you want it. No matter what you say. Deep in your all-American heart, you are American, aren't you, pal? You crave this little honey, which will count for you and store for you and talk for you, and one day it might even kiss for you. No offense, miss. Point is, it will save you time. Time. And we need all the time we can save. You can't kill time without injuring eternity. This sweetheart here, this little baby, looks like any ordinary machine. Isn't that so? A mess of screws and buttons, a whole heap of plastic. Comes with new words too, RAMs and ROMs. Think that's what the machine is made of? Do you? The hardware and the software and the mouse? Not a chance. The computer is made of you, lady. It's got you all inside it. You wished it here. The sun rises in the west. Play it, Mr. Dvorak. There's a new world coming, looming on the desktop. Oh, say, can you see it? Public opinion had, in 20 years, clearly shifted. Though initially fearing the big brother eye of the computer, the counterculture of the 60s had reappropriated the device and launched the Cyberdelic Fusion. It wanted to show us that technology could be our friend. An adept of LSD and electronics, Jobs grew up during this transition, surrounded by engineers and bathing in the mystical aura of new technology. He'd be in the perfect position to further the computer revolution.
But I'm not loving up a 7-year-old product at the Mac launch.
Computers aren't paintings.
Fuck you. I'm gonna say fuck you every time you say that until you either die or stop.
Steve.
Try it.
Steve.
Say it.
Computers aren't
Fuck
paintings.
you. Yes, they are, and what I want.
After having designed and having moderate success with their first project, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak founded Apple. With their next device, the aforementioned Apple II, the seeds of aesthetics in the computer were being sowed. Jobs took inspiration from, out of all places, culinary robots. He really appreciated the curves and fine lines on the household appliances and wanted to approach the design of their new computer in the same way. More interestingly, the young entrepreneur had a particular concern with regards to sound. Being a man greatly influenced by Zen Buddhism, he didn't want the device to be equipped with a fan, as the constant humming would be a distraction and an annoyance. This was a unique decision, as all computers traditionally required fans to cool off the power supply. Small miracles in electronic engineering had to be done in order to satisfy such a constraining criterion. Already, one can observe a principle that Jobs, for better or worse, would follow for the duration of his career. Engineering would obey design.
I'm just asking you to manage expectations.
Look at their faces when they see what it is. They won't know what they're looking at or why they like it, but they'll know they want it.
Not instantly. When people heard Rite of Spring, they tore the chairs out of the theater. They didn't buy the record.
Rite of Spring happens to be the most...
The next artistic innovation would need to go beyond the physical object. Steve found aesthetic gold in Xerox's Palo Alto Research Center. The park was developing new technology that would replace the terminal command lines that were used up to then in order for a user to communicate with the computer.
Hello, friends.
The Graphical User Interface, GUI, omnipresent in all of our devices today, was born.
If I want to tell you there's a spot in your shirt, I point to the spot. I don't say there's a spot 14 centimeters down from the collar and 3 centimeters to the right of the second button while I try to remember what the command is for club soda. That's not how a person's mind works.
Picasso had a saying, "Good artists borrow, great artists steal." And that's exactly what Jobs did with the GUI.
It's an abstract.
You use Mac Paint. Push that key and the S at the same time. Now type your name. Do you know which boxes say? Right. Go ahead and click on it.
As such, with this new innovation that could precisely draw colors and shapes on the screen, pixel by pixel, the designers and developers at Apple invented the virtual desktop as we know it today. Files, folders, documents, pictures, trash cans, typical objects we can all visually identify and associate a function to, were brought onto the screen with the help of carefully designed icons. A plethora of beautiful fonts were created to garnish the software, and an incredible amount of attention was given to the aesthetics of minute things such as toolbars. Steve believed that if one had to look at that screen every day, it would be primordial for it to be perfectly designed. Continuing upon that train of thought, the housing of the computer itself also had to be just as beautiful. It was in Apple's identity to create simple objects that deserved to be on display at MoMA. He took inspiration from the Bauhaus movement, using functional design practices and pure lines and shapes to effectively sculpt the Macintosh. Funnily, the more that Jobs and his team worked on it, the more that it resembled a friendly face. Once the final product was finalized, to really nail in his idea that a computer could be more than a simple box, he asked his whole team to sign their names, like painters would. These names would be printed on every motherboard, hidden inside their new piece of art. Duchamp had dented the art world with his ready-mades. Jobs would soon follow with his Macintosh.
Today we celebrate the first glorious anniversary of the information purification directives. We have created, for the first time in all history, a garden of pure ideology, where each worker may bloom, secure from the pests of a contradictory thoughts. Purification of thoughts is more powerful a weapon than any fleet or army on earth. We are one people. One will, one resolve, one cause. Our enemies shall talk themselves to death, and we will bury them with their own confusion. We shall prevail.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
In order to really redefine our relationship with the computer, one had to make it a world event, a real spectacle. This started with a legendary ad, aired during the Super Bowl. It didn't show the product, but it captured the feeling and emotion of the Macintosh. It was more than a classic commercial. It was a movie, and it portrayed the computer as the hero we needed in our collective crusade for freedom.
The exit signs need to be off or we're not going to get a full blackout.
We've spoken to the building manager and the fire marshal.
And?
There's absolutely no way they're going to let us turn the exit signs off.
I'll pay whatever the fine is.
The fine is they're going to come in and tell everyone to leave.
You explained to the fire marshal that we're in here changing the world.
I did, but unless we can also change the properties of fire, he doesn't care.
If a fire causes a stampede to the unmarked exits, it'll have been well worth it for those who survive. For those who don't, less so, but still pretty good.
Look,
I need it to go black. Real black. Get rid of the exit signs and don't let me know how you did it.
The launch on January 24th, 1984, was effectively a cultural event. The computer spoke to the audience, presenting himself with an electronic voice. Thanks to his sense of drama and theatrical skill, Steve Jobs had put up an unforgettable show for his audience. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Jobs became a celebrity, and the Macintosh became his best piece. When invited to Sean Lennon's birthday by Yoko Ono, Andy Warhol and Keith Haring were there. Steve had brought the child a computer as a gift. Though the machine was seen as evil in the contemporary art scene, the famous painters were enthralled by it. They even used Mac Paint.
Sean was down on the floor with him. Steve turned it on, put Mac Paint in there. It took him about 2 seconds to show Sean how to deal with it, and Sean pretty soon was drawing pictures. Later, Steve told me it was one of the first times he'd watched a child with a Mac. Eventually, I sort of became aware that there were some people, who'd come into the room, and I looked over my shoulder, and there was Andy Warhol. So there was this great moment that I'll never forget. Andy Warhol gets down on his hands and knees with Sean on one side and Steve on the other side. I remember that Warhol would pick up the mouse and, instead of gliding it along the floor, the tiled floor in Sean's bedroom, he would sort of pick it up and was trying to figure out how to make it work. And Steve very patiently would sort of lower his hand down and say, no, you kind of push it along. So Andy sort of fooled around with it, and he was completely mesmerized. I mean, when he zoned in on something, the rest of the world disappeared, and that was what it was like watching Warhol in front of a Macintosh for the first time. And then, he got this big smile on his face, and he looked up, he said, I drew a circle. And it was great.
The Macintosh, Apple's near-mythological home computer, has gotten off to a rocky start in its battle with industry titan IBM.
With sales originally projected to be 1 million in the first quarter, Apple has sold only 35,000 of the user-friendly machines in the month.
Do you know how many Macs were sold last month? 500.
In a move that surprised some, but not all on Wall Street, the board of directors of Apple Computers voted today to fire its co-founder, Steve Jobs.
Few people have the ability to make the world wait, but that is just what Jobs is doing with his new company, Next.
Unfortunately for him, the Macintosh, though an incredibly innovative and culturally shattering product, didn't sell. Jobs was not to be a part of Apple anymore. Still a young man and still looking to pursue his work, he started a new company whose logo was drawn by the famous graphic designer Paul Rand. Next was going to build a new computer with the now renowned meticulousness and attention to detail that Jobs had become famous for.
$100,000 to Paul Rand for a corporate logo when we didn't even know what our company made. A $650,000 mold for the cube because God forbid the angles be 90.1 instead of 90.
I forbid the angles to be 90.1 instead of 90. That box could be on display at the Guggenheim.
Once more, unfortunately, financial success didn't follow. It is interesting to note that the CEO knew perfectly that his product wouldn't be viable on the market, and yet still proceeded to craft it with care, adhering to his design principles above all else. Truly, Steve approaches his work like an artist.
More than a year after it was first unveiled to industry insiders, the Next computer is finally available in stores.
And it appears to be 2 strikes in a row for Steve Jobs.
Students and educators are finding it difficult to justify the machine's high cost.
So much for the Black Cube. Next just sold its factory to Canon and laid off half its employees.
In the world of computers, it's kill or be killed.
Apple Computer has fallen on hard times.
It is laying off about 2,500 people. Apple is continuing to lose market share with no new innovations in the pipeline except the Newton, pet project of CEO John Sculley.
If you really want to be mobile, you want a Newton PDA. But then again, maybe you don't.
It turns handwriting into computer text.
Hey, Doc, take a memo on your Newton. Beat up Mertens.
In 1980, Apple had 30% of the market. Today, Apple has only 3.2%.
That's it. John Sculley has been fired from Apple.
And what about this internet thing? Do you know anything about that?
It is the big new thing. Rumors are flying around Apple Computer once again over who will take over the helm.
In the news at this hour are remarkable high-tech reunions.
Well, it's happening. In $1 billion shakeup, Apple is purchasing Next Computer's operating system, which may mean...
Is the prodigal son returning?
Bet on it.
Guess what? Mac is back.
Apple co-founder Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs is returning to Apple.
Steve doubled down on his obsession with design and went all in with the creation of the iMac. Johnny Ive, one of the mogul's principal artistic collaborators, philosophically analyzed products and ideas in order to extract their essence into an aesthetic. Symbiotically, they both believed that an object had a soul that it wanted to express.
The new trash can is wrong. I want to tell you I appreciate all the hours you put into it, but I can't because of how terrible it is.
They picked the color and the materials of the casing with great care. They designed the curves with passion and emotion. Many fights were held with regards to the CD slot, with the engineers believing a retractable lip would be more versatile in the long run, while the design team wanted a smooth and continuous surface.
On the slide?
The floor, the pin spot.
I think we want a sharp focus.
Don't take it personally. Just not a fan of the circus aesthetic.
All right, let's hold here. We're gonna have to go up and refocus the instruments.
Just one, the 30's fine.
While we're holding, there are well-wishers in the VIP room. And Woz is here.
Steve Wozniak.
As tradition had it, the launch of the iMac was of historical proportions. Choreographing his presentations, the computer would be revealed to the world in a manner so theatrical, one would feel as if the event was of religious nature. The show would continue down to the unboxing, turning even a simple and traditionally mundane action into a special and memorable occasion. Consumers would never see Apple computers as ordinary products. Finally, in the year 2000, a Power Mac G4 Cube was put on display at MoMA. It wasn't in museums that the public would most commonly visit the works of Steve Jobs, but in the revolutionary Apple stores. Built as galleries with floating staircases, massive glass panes, and Florentine stone, the CEO had transformed the action of shopping into something far more magical. You could see the product in all of its purity in locations that brought it to light like never before. People could simply walk into the store and admire the objects on display. However, in my opinion, the most interesting thing Steve has managed to do is to cultivate and define the relationship that a consumer has with a computer. Apple products have a unique energy to them. They feel like they're products made for creative people, and they make you feel like you are a creative person. By using an object of beauty crafted with such care, you cannot help but apply slivers of the same effort into the work you do yourself while using it. The Think Different slogan acts almost as an order to all Mac users.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them, but the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
Associating emotions, feelings, and passions to an object, much like an artist does with a painting, a song, or a play, makes people react to it. Jobs was telling people that using the right computer can make their artistic personalities more powerful. Throughout art history, waves of innovation and culturally defining moments often happen in a concentrated location. Ancient Greece bred classical texts and established narrative structures that we still follow today. 15th century northern Italy was the home of the Renaissance and its contributions to painting, sculpting, and drawing. Post-Napoleonic France gave us the novel and Romanticism. Post-war New York was the hub for contemporary art. Silicon Valley, after Steve Jobs transformed the computer into a piece of art, became the cradle for digital innovation.
Gonna put music in your pocket.
What?
100 songs. 1,000 songs. 500 songs, somewhere between 500 and 1,000 songs, right in your pocket, because I can't stand looking at that inexplicable Walkman anymore.
The man was certainly not loved by all, as he had somewhat of a temper and could be profoundly dislikable. Yet, he radically revolutionized the way we interact with computers and perceive them. His legacy was solidified with the iPod, the iPhone, and the iPad, and the values he bequeathed to Apple helped the company continuously reign as a behemoth of artful technology. As I work on this video essay on my MacBook, as I'm sure you guys have clearly noticed, I'm constantly reminded of how when form and function fluidly tango, the results are always more vibrant.